In. All right, so this is your show, Matt in Seattle, aloha. Thailand, wow, you guys are tuning in from everywhere. So it's your show. The discussion will be led by you. I want to, of course, talk about what is happening right now in the world, and more importantly, talk about what is happening within us. Because the ultimate intention and goal of mindfulness practice is that we can maintain our inner peace regardless of what's going on around us. And so that's really the question. That's what I'm hoping we can tap into, is how are you doing internally? And I believe those who are perhaps more accustomed to always getting their way, who are perhaps sore losers, who have not had perhaps many instances in life when someone has told them no or whatnot, are having a much more difficult time with this. It's very similar to meditation, where if you've never sat down and tried to calm your mind and try to get acquainted with how it works and how it runs around and chases everything it wants, then when you first try to do that, it's going to fight back. It is going to object to sitting still. I compare it in Buddhist boot camp to taking a puppy for a walk, and you try to train it to stay right by your side. And if you've never trained it to, then it's going to chase after everything that piques its curiosity, right? It's going to chase after everything that comes into view, whether it be a squirrel or a scent, and you're trying to train it to stay by your side regardless of stimuli. That's pretty much what meditation ultimately does. I don't think we need to go into meditation with that goal in mind, so to speak, to quiet the mind, because good luck with that. I believe the mind is going to do what it's going to do. The first intention with meditation is to mainly observe the mind, get to know it better, get to understand, how your thoughts are working, and go from there, if that makes sense. So let's apply this to what's happening in the world right now. If you are comfortable and you have practiced sitting still, then being invited to stay home, to stay safe, is not so foreign. It's not, your inner spoiled rich kid isn't retaliating and throwing a tantrum and saying, no, I want to go outside. It's saying, all right, this is when we stay in. And I'm curious if any of you are challenged with staying indoors, with staying still, with staying quiet. What is that about? Is it about being controlled? Is it about being told what to do? What is the, trying to find the right words. What is the resistance? We talk a lot in our monthly groups about pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And the full equation, so to speak, is pain plus resistance equals suffering. Pain in life is inevitable. Growing old, getting sick, dying, that's going to happen. But if you resist change, if you resist what is happening, it's the resistance itself that causes the anguish. It's the resistance itself that create the turmoil within us that makes it really hard to deal with what's happening. So I don't know if any of you, so far, everyone commenting from New York to, oh gosh, where are you guys? All over the place are saying that you're just using this time to meditate more, that as introverts, you're embracing this, that you're just increasing your self knowledge, if you would. But I think it would be unfair to say that there isn't some, I don't want to say the word struggle, because this is not a struggle per se. It's a shift. It's a shift in our comfort zone. It's a shift in what we're normally accustomed to. When we want to go to the store, we just go to the store. And now we have to introduce that pause between impulse and response, and really question a very important question that I hope we've been asking ourselves frequently, which is this something I need, or is this something I want? So that's an important question for us to ask. Someone is saying slowing down is challenging, adapting. I find that mental health is better. I'm engaged in doing something. Luckily, I have plenty of projects here at home to keep me busy and trying to balance that with yoga and meditation. And yes, Leon, it is for many people an inconvenience and nothing more. I do want to definitely honor the fact that some people are more than just merely inconvenienced. They are, and I hate to use the term front lines, but they are in the front lines, at the grocery stores, selling, to exposing themselves to potential risk. And we used to think of, military and the front line, and, doctors who are still very much in the front line. The firefighters who run into a fire knowing that there's risk involved. And so now we are all asked to step outside of our comfort zone. No, we're not being asked to step into a burning house. We're actually just asked to stay inside. It's not a big ask. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but would our resistance, our challenge with staying put and writing this out, is that stemming from a very selfish part within all of us? Because I think there are two parts of us, at least two. There's often more, but there's the selfish and the selfless. There's the greedy and the kind and generous. And so, the making peace with the coexistence of both of them. And yes, there are many people, Freeman Griffin, who have died from this. And I have a friend in Hawaii who's actually in a medically induced coma, and he's young and an athlete, and not at all what you normally hear is that it's usually the elderly or whatnot. And so I don't want to, again, I'm trying to avoid using words like the fight or the struggle, or because we're simply being asked to keep something from boiling over, so to speak. And perhaps the first thing that comes to mind is patience is what we're asked for. And maybe that's what's lacking. Would you say that's what makes this difficult? It's challenging to have these discussions when I'm not face to face with you. So I'm trying to keep up with your comments. I just want to know what would make this easier. Not that this is meant to be easy or supposed to be easy or whatnot, but what would help in this time to to be more patient, for lack of a better word. Marianne said, I'm using this time as a reset, and it's giving me an opportunity to slow down and be intentional. I truly believe some changes will be made after the pandemic to make my cake perfect, quote unquote. Thank you, Marianne. That's what I think is perhaps an overlooked opportunity, is what's going to come after this. What changes are we going to implement in our lives once the quote unquote ban is lifted? Are we going to continue being mindful of needs versus wants? Are we going to go right back to our old ways? Are we going to honor and celebrate how nature has thrived when we reduced the pollution, and maybe honor that? How is this going to change us? Now, I'm not concerned so much with, the difficult time you're having staying still. Perhaps the bigger question is the difficult time you're having shifting to becoming a different version of yourself. I don't know. This is so hard to gauge if it's making any sense. Someone saying, I'm finding it a little difficult to stay informed without getting caught up in the hysteria. That's a great point, Kevin. I think limiting, perhaps, read the news maybe twice a day. That's it. I think, and getting it from multiple sources, that's a very important point as well, because we are getting mixed information. What we do know is that if you just stay home, you'll be okay. So that, getting caught up in refreshing the feed and finding out, well, how many people died today and how many people died today and where's the thing, and finding out about what people are doing and what, you're just stressing yourself out for no reason. It's actually a very bad use of your time, and so limit your exposure to maybe twice a day and stay home. I have found that, when you need food, and we all need food, especially those of us who didn't go out and hoard and and stock up. I've found farmers markets all over the country are implementing a curbside pickup option where you can even pre-order it ahead of time, a box of fresh veggies and whatnot, and you just pull up in your car, they'll put the box in your trunk, and you just drive away. And there's just no, you pay them through Venmo or whatnot, and it's all very safe. And you're getting fresh produce. You're not living off of what I call brown food, which is just like pasta and rice and beans. So Darren said the numbers aren't important. The need to know the information now. And I think that's just indicative of, our patterns during life before this pandemic, as if we were so accustomed to refreshing our feed on Instagram, on Facebook, or whatnot constantly, because we need that constant stimuli. That is what I'm hoping, we can look at and go, what is this need for stimuli? I have a friend, and she has a very difficult time staying at home. She needs to constantly be going out to the movies or to live music shows or to go hiking and camping and running and friends and dinners and and all of that is wonderful. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with hiking or time in nature or movies. It's that the resistance to being at home, to slowing down, having a weekend to just enjoy her own company. And it reminds me of something that one of my teachers once said, is that the hardest thing for people to see is themselves. And I think perhaps that's why we're so addicted to stimuli, is the moment we're not stimulated by outside noise, visual, auditory, or whatnot, we are forced to look at ourselves. And that can be really scary for a lot of people, especially if they've never done it before. So, does that make sense? That this is an opportunity for us to look at ourselves, get to know ourselves better, and find out what are we afraid to look at, and who was it who just said, Tessa, something about using this to gain perspective on my own mistakes. I I'm so reluctant to ever use the word mistakes because we we learn in different ways, and sometimes what I like to call are mistakes. They're mistakes that you apparently must make in order to learn the lesson. And so it wasn't a mistake. It was necessary. Even though it may have hurt someone else, it may have hurt you, it may have slowed you down, it may have derailed you, that that was necessary for reasons that are at the time especially are far beyond our limited comprehension. I'm trying to keep up with your questions because they're coming in from two different places. There are people who are logged into YouTube, and there I actually see a feed of the conversation that's happening online with everyone. And then there are some people who are watching on Patreon, and I'm getting the comments separately. So I'm trying trying to keep all that balanced. And so someone else commented that they're having a difficult time because they have symptoms, but they are not qualified for testing because they don't have all the symptoms, or because a number of different reasons. Some people don't live in areas where they have testings, or sometimes you think you may have it and you go and you stand in line to get tested and you contract it in line. So it's challenging to know. I will admit that I myself was very challenged by this because I had just recently gotten back from a 5-week backpacking trip in the Philippines, and unbeknownst to me, I was taking this vaccine for malaria, and the vaccine itself causes a high fever and almost cold-like symptoms, and you have to take the vaccine a couple weeks before the trip, while you're on the trip, and for 3 or 4 weeks after the trip. And so I got back and I'm experiencing all these weird side effects that it's someone else commented jokingly that this is an interesting time of spring, and everyone's like, is it allergies or is it corona? And you just don't know. So someone else commented, Casey Gilbert, I'm trying to use this time to reflect on many things in my life and what is important to me and how I want to live intentionally. It's easy to become so overwhelmed in this climate. And I think no one else but you is a good gauge of where you pass that threshold from inwhelmed to overwhelmed, if that makes sense. So I think all of these challenges are real. I don't want to nullify any of them. I want us to. Someone else is saying they're having a hard time, a difficult time, or calling this disastrous time, horrible times. I do not want to use any of those words to describe the current situation, because the words with which we use as adjectives to describe our day, to describe our life, they affect our experience of the situation. Two people can be in the same situation and describe it in two different ways and have two very different experiences. I don't know if that makes sense. I met a guy who said, "Oh my gosh, I went through this horrible divorce 20 years ago. It was horrible and painful and long and treacherous." And I was like, "Wow, that was 20 years ago, dude. How would your divorce sound, feel? How would you carry it if you stopped describing it as that? What if you had just told me I went through a divorce 20 years ago and you didn't pile on top of that all of those extra weights? And immediately he was like, it would feel a lot lighter. And so I'm wondering how much we would benefit from going through this interesting scenario. And I have no objection to using the term interesting or unique because it doesn't have much weight. But avoiding those adjectives, I think that's one thing we can catch ourselves. The practice of mindfulness is about, and meditation, it's not to try to control the mind, it's to observe it, right? To observe and watch how it operates. And the moment you observe it, you become aware of its inner workings. And that's when we can catch ourselves like, oh, you're about to deviate from, and I don't want to say positive adjectives because we don't need to lie to ourselves and say this experience is incredible, but when we veer away from what's that quote from Rumi, the difference between judgment and observation. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, Rumi said, "Be a witness, not a judge." That's in a nutshell what I'm suggesting, that we be a witness, not a judge. Does that make sense? And how does that sound to you? Would that help right now going through this? Whether going through this to you means needing to stay at home to not just reduce your exposure, but to reduce the risk of possibly passing on to someone else. What would it look like if we use this as an opportunity? So many times we want nothing more than to stay home and get to projects that we haven't gotten to or whatnot. And now that we are told to stay home, all we want to do is go out. I think it's quite interesting. Let me read some of your questions here. You mentioned using the word interesting in another podcast. Thank you. I've been very mindful about my words surrounding the whole situation. It definitely helps keep the positive perspective. Thank you. Yes, what's interesting is that all of my events, in-person events, have been canceled. So I've been doing I've been a guest on so many different podcast episodes and they all want to talk about this, obviously. And so the use of adjectives, I think, is one area that I think is not necessarily only beneficial right now, but in general, to bring awareness to how many times we make our situation a lot worse by describing it with those adjectives. Someone said, I think this could be the shakeup that we need. What an opportunity to reflect on media, consumerism, politics. Yes. What a great time it is to lean into humanity. And that's the humankind, be both. And if we can be kind in this situation, because that's what gets me, the comments from people who are, as I mentioned earlier, loosely referred to as in the front lines. They are the cashiers at the grocery stores. They're stocking the shelves. And the people who are leaving their house and going shopping or whatnot are so rude to them. That's what breaks my heart. And so I'm wondering if this is an opportunity for our true colors to come through and see how we, as I said in the very beginning today, how we respond when, I don't want to say sore losers, but when we're told no. Like, are we the spoiled rich kid who gets very, very upset, like our mind does when we tell it to stay still, or are we going to put our best foot forward? I understand that we're all concerned that we don't know how long this is going to last or whatnot, but taking it out on someone who's just like you, who's going to work, and doctors, personnel at, I don't even know what's open. I want to say banks and whatnot, but I honestly don't know. Here in California, at least, nothing's open. So that I know of, I haven't left the house, so I don't know. We have done, like I said earlier, the farmers market. So that's one way. I just can't imagine what would drive someone other than what I've been talking about for years. This growing sense of entitlement. That we feel like the world owes us something just because we woke up this morning. And it's not, I've said before that you woke up this morning not necessarily because the world owes you something, but what you offer the world. Someone said, I feel guilty for struggling with my first world problems. It's so true. It's so true that we need perspective and perhaps humor. I think I don't know your name, the one who said that. You have a screen name, Time to Simplify. I think humor is a really good way to catch yourself, and you're like, oh, look at you complaining about your first world problems, and just it brings a lightheartedness to it and keeps things in perspective, and honoring that there are people who are having much worse time with this than our inability to go to the store or to go to the movie theater. Someone asked what I suggest when you're feeling a lot of mixed emotions. First suggestion, don't act on any of them. That's where it gets problematic. Not when we're feeling different things. The feelings come and go, and we feel excited, and we feel relaxed, we feel relieved, then we feel scared, then we feel worried. Those are all valid, and you just observe them the way you would traffic on a busy street. You're just sitting there watching them go by, and you're like, oh, there's a fast car, there's a slow car, there's a big truck, there's a little, there's a guy on a bicycle, there's a guy. Just observe all those feelings come and go, and they're all valid, and don't give any of them too much weight. So that's the first thing. When you're experiencing and are overwhelmed by a lot of mixed emotions, don't act on any of them. First and foremost, hold them all very lightly. Now, if one feeling keeps coming back, and actually weighs more and more heavily on you, then the question I always ask myself is, where is this coming from? Where did it originate? Who did I learn this behavior from? Am I responding to this because I've been taught to respond like this? Or is this authentically me? And I'll probably get back to that question again as more ideas come up. I just want to keep going. Stacy asked, the husband just had major surgery, and because of the pandemic, no visitors are allowed in the hospital at all. Suggestions on how I might deal with this kind of separation. Heartbreaking. Stacy, he is in the hospital getting really great care. He had the surgery, which is fantastic, and he's gonna come home, and you not seeing him is the best thing for his health. So that is, and I know all of this intellectually, and what I'm guessing, Stacey, is that the challenge is emotionally. You want nothing more than to be with him. And that separation is really, really hard. It's been said that separation makes the heart grow fonder. So maybe when he comes back, your relationship with your husband will be all that much better. Maybe this is a really great opportunity to get stuff done that you don't get done when he's home. It's find a way to communicate with him, whether it be, I don't have an iPhone, but people use like a FaceTime, or you could use Skype, or I don't know, some way to connect with him, see him. He knows you love him. He knows you're there. Part of the reason we want contact with the people we love is to reassure them that we care for them and whatnot. And you can still do that. So someone else suggested, what is that? Live streaming, Skype, Zoom. Um, so again, I don't want to nullify the. I'll go as far as to use the challenge you're having with the distance between you two. I would very strongly suggest you stop using the words heartbreaking. That's what gives it so much weight. Like, my heart is breaking because I can't see him. Your heart is so full of love. It's not breaking, it's expanding, it's growing. And it's, is it challenging? Yes. But it's not. Again, I don't want to nullify it. I don't know if it warrants the term heartbreaking. I don't know if that helps to alleviate some of the weight, or if that sounds like I'm mocking your pain, because that's not what I intend to do. But it's so difficult difficult when I'm not directly in front of you to try and do this. Um, and again, bringing lightness to this situation is actually a really great way to deal with this. Send him jokes, send him books, do connect with him, love him in ways that he would appreciate. You know, Mindfulness and consideration go hand in hand, and so take him into consideration. How, the five love languages, and so what is his love language, and how can you express your love for him in a way that he would understand? Someone else said, I was wondering how we could keep aware of the lessons that we have learned during this period when we go back to everyday life. Whew. Judy immediately responded, how about journaling? Journaling is a really good way. Write them down. And I would also say, don't worry. If you need to remember, a lesson will repeat itself until you learn it. So if you learn a lesson and you set new intentions in your life, perhaps to be more mindful about the difference between need and want, journaling is one thing. I only have a hard time with that because then you have stacks and stacks of journals and none that would actually be reminders. And so sticky notes are good for me, like putting a note that says need or want. A friend of mine had a difficult time with always going online, and I would go as far as to use the word wasting a lot of his time online, surfing websites and whatnot, social media. And so he set his computer so that when he opens up the computer and opens up a new browser, his home screen is an image that says, what is the best use of your time? And more often than not, as soon as he saw what is the best use of your time, he'd be like, well, it's not this. So he would close the laptop again and go do something else. When he did log on to social media, he had one of those, again, these are simple solutions, but really effective. One of those kitchen timers, those egg timers, and he would just set it for 15 minutes. And that was how long he had to look up Facebook, look up people's profiles, look up the news, and then when the timer goes off, that's it. So, I'm trying to keep up with your notes. Let's see here. Oh, someone sent a message via text and phone. I don't know how that's happening. Let's see here. Freeman. Yes, texting, cell phones, and totally know everything. I said it's true. Oh, I see. Stacy was saying that connecting with him over the phone and whatnot works. And and she's on chapter 20 of Faithfully Religionless. Great. Then you can finish reading it and pass it on to your husband to read or listen to the audiobook. And then you guys will have something to talk about because he had read it and you had read it. And someone else said, yeah, the sticky note idea works because they rarely go back through and reopen a journal. That's what I was saying, that my resistance to journaling is because then there's just too much there's too much to go through, and it's not encapsulated into something you can remember. Once you have sticky notes, once you have the encapsulated lesson that you've learned, be mindful of need versus want. Remember your problems are first world problems, and you have these bullet points. That can become your new morning meditation. Is, what am I grateful for? What do I need versus what do I want? What do I have in my life rather than what am I lacking, etc. That way, it's not just something you do one time. It's something you implement into your daily routine, that it becomes a pattern for you to wake up, and instead of thinking, I didn't get enough sleep, I'm not rich enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not skinny enough, whatever you're thinking, I have enough food, I have enough blankets, I have enough family and friends, and you know what I mean? Then that becomes your new morning routine of just showering yourself with the abundance in your life rather than what's lacking. So journal, then go through the journal, do a Cliff's Notes version of the journal, then go through the Cliff's Notes and do bullet points of the journal, and then use those bullet points in your morning meditation. Does that help? I hope so. Someone else, Cam Wright, said one of her favorite quotes is, relax, nothing is under control, which is such good advice, because people are saying things like, oh, I feel like everything is out of my control. Like, everything has always been out of your control. So the only thing we've lost at this time is the illusion of control, the illusion of not just control, but predictability or continuity or permanence. We lived with this false sense of stability, and the only thing we've lost is the illusion. Now we're living in the reality that everything is temporary, and how wonderful that is to enjoy what you have while you have it, because you may not have it for long, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be a virus that takes it away, whether it be your privilege to go to the store or your job or your income or whatnot. Maybe we can all live within our means, better yet, under, so that we can give more and take less. I don't know if that helps, but yes, I think that finding a way to implement what we learn during this time, once the quote unquote the ban is lifted. Someone else says, I'm planning on starting a new chapter of Boundless Love Project, and I'm grateful that I can take it slow during this pandemic. Yeah. Again, you can do it right. This is another friend of mine is working on finally writing his memoir. I've been writing him for years to finally not just finish writing it, but start writing it. And so this is the nudge I hope he needed to get it done. And so when it's all over, he was joking the other day that people are going to ask, so, hey, what did you do in 2020 when you couldn't leave the house? And he's like, I wrote a book. What did you do? And so this is a really great time to not say, oh, I just watched the news all day and I waited for it to be over. Use this time. Time is such a gift, and we are given this time, and every additional case of someone ending up in the hospital, of someone sick, of someone dying, is a reminder to stay home. I hope we use it as such. I'm going to keep going with your notes before we wrap up here. With my gratitude journal, I like to add why I'm grateful for that particular entry. I'm grateful for my boyfriend because he's super handsome. I really like that distinction of not just what are you grateful for, but why are you grateful for? And the reason, and I would invite you to take this step further. When you say something like you said, like, I'm grateful for my boyfriend, when I ask people, what are you grateful for? I often append to that and say, what are you grateful for? Not who, but what. So that you can't say, I'm grateful for my boyfriend, or I'm grateful for my kids, or I'm grateful for my parents. You have to tap deeper and go, what is it I'm grateful for? Not who, what. And then you can say, I'm grateful for the companionship. I'm grateful for the support, and that way your gratitude is in a way more specific, but in a way it's applicable to many more people than just the one. And when you miss someone, like I believe was it Beverly, Stacy, who can't be around her husband right now because he's in the hospital after surgery, and she can say, I'm grateful for my husband. Then Stacy can say, what I'm grateful for is his physical presence in my life, his being here, his warmth, his comfort, whatever that is. You know what I mean? Just get really in touch with your gratitude. I think that's something we often overlook because it's easy to say, "Oh, I'm grateful for my job." Well, but why? What is it about your job you're grateful for? Is it the opportunity to learn? Is the opportunity to give? Skill share, as someone said. Find out what it is. So I'm glad that's resonating with you guys. I'm grateful you live in the USA. Other countries go through this every day. Exactly. Like I said, I went on a backpacking trip to the Philippines, and I had to get so many vaccines and shots and whatnot. And it couldn't even drink the water there because even though the locals can probably stomach it most of the time, I couldn't. And I was like, wow, I'm so fortunate to live in a place where, for the most part, a few cities and states notwithstanding, I can drink water out of the tap, and I have access to drinkable water even if I can't. How fortunate we are to have systems in place that ensure our continued health and information so we can take our own health into our own hands and have choices. I think beyond anything else, when I think of the difference between the benefits of living in a first world country rather than third or fourth, is we have choices. And so that's when we talk about what am I grateful for, choices is often at the top of my list, whether it be choices of food, choices, options, variety, flexibility, things to do. Those of us who have functioning limbs and internal organs, I think we've talked about this before, about what's called the complaint bracelet. It's a bracelet you put on your wrist, and every time you catch yourself complaining, you move it from one wrist to the other. The idea is that you raise awareness to how many times throughout the day you complain. And if your intention is to complain less, this is, again, this goes in steps. The first thing is to raise awareness to how often you're complaining, because most of the time we're not aware of our own habitual tendencies unless someone points it out to us. And often if they point it out to us without being asked, then we get upset with them and we feel judged, when really all they're doing is holding up a mirror to us. In fact, strangers hold a mirror to us all the time. That which we don't like about someone else is oftentimes exactly what we don't like about ourselves. And it irritates us when we see someone else do it, probably because it's something that we wish we would do less of. We're just not very honest with ourselves about that. So I think this is a really great time to not be stressed, to not be worried, to not be concerned, to definitely not panic. If my anxiety has taught me anything over the years, is that panicking never solves anything. That goes back to someone's question about multiple emotions. And my answer was, don't act on any of them, because that is just the the impulse. That's just the opposite. It's the mindless way to act. And again, when you think of mindful, think of mindless. The idea of mindful is that your decisions aren't solely rational and they're not solely emotional. They're together. It's like the mind and the heart come together to make a decision. So let's see. I'm going to read some more of the notes. Freeman said, "I'm grateful for Timber." Oh, thank you for taking the time to create this live stream, for the opportunity to share with the community during this time when we're all at home. Most of us are at home, but yes, thank you. Someone else said, "I'm grateful for you, Timber. Thank you. I want you to know that finding you has truly helped me transform myself. You have helped me keep the awareness of staying mindful and grateful for everyday blessings." I appreciate that. It's what's interesting is that, it's the message that has transformed my own life. So my gratitude is to the message itself, never the many messengers, because what I really hope you guys see is that, if you feel like I'm holding your hand and whatnot, and we're walking on this path together, just be very aware that someone else is holding my other hand, and we're all helping each other up. The message has transformed my life. So it just seems like the most natural thing for me to do is to share it with other people. So thank you guys. Amen to that. I'm reading through your notes. Marlon, I'm increasing my monthly support for Buddhist Bootcamp. Thank you. Marlon, some people support either through, you said on Facebook, there's patreon.com. Again, $1 a month is usually all to keep this podcast going, especially now. All of my events have been canceled. Nothing. My flight to Missouri last week was canceled. And so whether it be through Patreon or supporting through Facebook, which goes to the Prison Library Project. And so, just like when you order books from, I still have some in stock. I don't even know if the printers will print and ship them to me if I want more, but I still have copies of Buddhist Bootcamp and Faithfully Religionless. They're just $10 each. And when you order them from my website, every time you get one, another one is donated to the Prison Library Project. And right now, more than ever, they appreciate reading materials and whatnot. And again, when you think about all the things to be grateful for, you are not in a cell right now. And I'm reading about all the different prisons where inmates and guards are contracting the virus. And if you think it's challenging for us, how difficult it is in such small quarters and how quickly this can spread because they're all together, so this is a really great time more than ever to think about others, to come together for the betterment of all. And thank you guys so much for walking on this journey with me. It's Sunday. Most churches are closed. Usually I'm invited to speak at various churches to do the sermon and leading by example is better than any sermon. And I'm hoping that by me living a simple life of just, I've got a roof over my head, and I have, in a nutshell, much more, as many of us, to be grateful for than to complain about. So thank you guys for listening to the podcast, sharing that podcast with other people. I'm blown away by how many people find out about Buddhist Bootcamp because of the podcast. I initially started the podcast trying to reach people who've read the book, to expand on what you've read, to unpack it and figure out more ways to implement it. But what's interesting is that it didn't necessarily just reach readers who have read the book. It's reaching people who have never read the book, perhaps will never read the book, but appreciate the podcast nonetheless. And the same goes for Facebook and Instagram. Every time you guys share something, it's the equivalent of when you use one candle to light 1,000 others. You're not diminishing the brightness of one candle, you're increasing it 1,000-fold. So continue sharing it with others. You guys are soldiers of peace in the army of love. I appreciate you very much. I'm going to go ahead and schedule the next live broadcast. have your questions ready ahead of time. We can even pick a topic ahead of time and dive into that, because we don't want to just talk about the virus all the time. There are so many other things happening within us. That's what I really want to tap into. What's going on outside is one thing. I want us to use this time to look within, if that helps. Um, we can be in a stressful situation and choose not to be stressed. We can be in a frustrating situation and choose not to be frustrated. And so, can we be in the middle of a pandemic and not be panicked? That's the invitation. Can we be calm in the storm?